Hello, Uta here with the start of a blooming daffodil. You've seen that bud. They go up and then they kind of bend over so that they do that way of blooming. um, and I'm kind of excited about this. It's been fun to watch it growing. If you watch the most recent videos, it's been also in the background. This one is about the famous Dutch protocols and the infamous fraudulent claims regarding the 2011 study that Annalou DeVries, Peggy Cohen-Kettenis, and Thomas Steensma published. It's very interesting to have checked out the sites where they have published this study, and I find now that they've removed all the data. But I know the data because I saw it previously. There are a lot of questions regarding this study, which was at the time considered a seminal study, and in fact, um, uh, a lot of the European, like Scandinavian countries, opened up so-called gender clinics to do this work with these distressed adolescents after this study was published. But the all of the people who did that, the doctors, the psychiatrists, etc., were assuming that more studies that support this whole idea that you give so-called puberty blockers, that is, gonadotrophin agonists, to 10, 11, 12-year-olds. I saw a recent thing where some doctor was claiming that African American girls should have to start taking this if they have cross-sex ideation when they're only 8 or 9, because this doctor claimed that so many of these particular female population are getting their periods that young, so of course we have to change that. So there's a whole bunch of convoluted thinking, and a lot of it stems from this particular study from these researchers at one of the early so-called gender clinics, the first gender clinic having been opened in Holland in 1987. I assume that was treating adults like my ex-husband Nettie, who had the surgery in his middle 30s in 1996. And I believe that it is exactly from men like Nettie and other so-called late transitioning men who put forth the retcon idea, that is the reorganized and reinterpreted childhood memories, such that, oh, they should have been diagnosed before they grew so tall and before they had male sex trait characteristics developing during their puberty, all this stuff, so that they could pass better. The whole idea is completely superficial. It is for the purpose of, in adulthood, so-called passing as the opposite sex. Okay, so this group, this research group, has been involved in phrases such as gender reassignment, which they abbreviate as GR in their write-ups, gender journey, which is something that when they were doing follow-up, trying to follow up 10 years later with the participants in this research, they found that some of these patients, I don't know if you'd call it reverted, but they were switched to calling themselves non-binary, because I surmise that perhaps they didn't realize how badly they would actually appear and how it just wouldn't work out for them to be so convincing as the opposite sex. And of course, the treatments made them infertile. And I think that it was in one of the admissions of these Dutch researchers that there was a regret about being infertile and not being able to have children. And Steensma, Cohen-Kettenis, and DeVries just shrug their shoulders and say, well, we explained that to you when you were 14. I don't understand why you didn't get it. Of course, this is me, speaking for them. They also use phrases like real life experience. That is often also called lived experience, which we don't need to say lived experience. We experience life. That is our experience. It just adds another word, as is often done within the cross-sex ideation cult. Now, in their study that originally had 70 patients in it, they had already excluded those who were obese, smoked, or came out on psychological assessments to have other what's called comorbidities or coexisting mental health problems. So these were supposedly well-adjusted early teens who just had this incongruence between their mind and their body that they are they have gender identity dysphoria. Now, and here's how they start. They're not even starting from a neutral position. They obviously aren't neutral because they don't have a control group for this. A quote from what is currently up there. You can't find the numbers anymore. Those I got from the testimony of Dr. Stephen B. Levine. Psychotherapy offered to gender dysphoric adolescents who are considering gender reassignment is supportive of gender reassignment. So that's how they start. They start assuming that you are going to be so ill from disliking your body that you should not be in a neutral study that is trying to find out scientifically if this whole thing of all the chemistry and all of the surgeries is going to work. And this is a funny thing where they compare a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old. One discusses aspects of sexuality with a 13-year-old who is only fantasizing about falling in love differently than an 18-year-old who tries to find ways of having sex while having a body that is not yet completely congruent with the experienced gender. Again, the presupposed results that, okay, you're going to find happiness after having all these treatments. Now, they started out with 70 participants. 15 just dropped out. The DeVries, Cohen-Kettenis, and Steensma do not make any conjectures or try to find out why there were 15. That's a pretty big percent of 70 who just dropped out. Those were desisters, and I suggest and pose that studying them would give us a lot more information. So then what happened was, in the process, as they're doing whatever it is, 4 or 5 years of this study, which was published in 2011, then there was a suicide, which for some reason didn't end the study entirely. When out of 55 you have a suicide. The suicide wasn't prior to treatment or at the beginning of this, it was at the end of this. The Swedish studies also found that suicides are much more common after and years after all of this affirmation treatment, so called. And then there was one more who died of sepsis after the surgery, which involved sectioning part of his intestines to be part of the what they call a neovagina, which I call the tissue tube that they're trying to convince us is functioning in the sexual experience the way a woman's labia, clitoris, and vagina function. And that can't be done. That's not possible. That plastic surgery does not create a vagina and that it does not function and have the same sensation as the female genitalia, because female genitalia has a high concentration of nerve endings. They cannot create that. Okay, but they go forward with their idea of timely puberty suppression. And this is all in the service of appearances. And in fact, for the female patients, which were in decided minority, it was mostly male patients, they suggest that timely administration of oxandrolone and an anabolic steroid could get more height for the girls. So that timely must mean that at the same time as they're taking puberty suppression, they're taking this anabolic steroid to make them grow taller so that they can be convincing as male. Pretty far stretch. And then they do mention that they have to tell their male patients about laser hair removal on a portion of the scrotal area when preparing for so-called vaginoplasty. And they warn about the unrealistic expectations regarding the depth of the neovagina, which we know from Sam K of Call Me Sam channel, that he had to just fake it when he was having sex with men while he was pretending to be a woman. He says that in a video I linked in my community page. Gender identity dysphoria seems to be highly persistent from early puberty on. But see, puberty is this time of mood swings, of immense change, and so how is it that they can claim that it is very intense, what did they say, persistent, highly persistent, when they didn't do a control group, and they're the ones who are encouraging this. They admit that this whole study is not neutral about so-called gender reassignment. Now, in this study, they also cite unpublished data from the same authors, from themselves, claiming that the bone mass issues that can result, meaning that weak bones, like osteoporosis in a 16-year-old girl, or scoliosis, which they found the Swedish film about this called Trans Train has all the proof of that. Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark have stopped doing this business with the kids. Now, so the unpublished data says that they could catch up with bone, I'll call it solidification, with bone mineralization, if they start taking the wrong sex hormones at the right timing. So these researchers are really doing this so that they can juggle the timing and find out the so-called best timing of when they should suppress your puberty, when after that they should start you on the wrong sex hormones. And then they were having these sex genitalia modification surgeries at the age of 18 for these kids. I'm going to remind you that brain research has shown us that we don't really have a mature brain until at least age 25. And the other piece of information about their statistics is that their their end result data only involved 32 or 33 of these patients. So post puberty suppression, post wrong sex hormones being given, and post these genital surgeries, the whole 53 of the remaining subjects in this study did not return the surveys. It was only 32 or 33 of them. So about 20 just didn't bother to answer. Maybe, we can make conjecture about that. You can just imagine some of them might have been unhappy. I know of one detransitioner from that group who is male and who has detransitioned and criticizes this group of researchers. The other huge problem, you can Google the Oxford professor of sociology, Michael Biggs, Biggs, and you will find his whole critique of this. He said that you find out that their survey was also done in this really strange way. It was a few months after the treatment ends, not years after, only a few months after. And they gave the survey that as an intake survey was originally given to females to the males who think they're females. They gave the vice versa, the intake survey that was for the males to the females who had so-called transitioned. Now, the survey that was designed for the males has questions regarding wet dreams at night, erections, all this kind of stuff. And, if you're a female who has had all kind of skin taken off of some part of your body and rolled up into a tube that's supposed to be like a penis, you're just not going to have wet dreams. You're not going to have nighttime erections. And if you are a male who has had a tissue tube inserted into your groin and pelvic girdle, then you're not going to have menstrual periods. So the entire beginning to end of this Dutch study, which is the foundation for the so-called affirmative Dutch protocols, is basically a fraud. As a scientific study, it is simply a fraud. Now, what I've understood is that the Dutch have a little arrogance problem. And it goes all the way back to building the dikes to regain the land from the sea and their technological superiority, supposedly, as well as their social laws regarding hard drugs and prostitution, both of which were legalized way back in the 1970s and are still legal. Now, the success of that is also questionable because the mayor of Amsterdam put out a message asking foreigners, especially apparently rowdy British guys, asking them to not come and do sex tourism because they're trashing the red light district when they drink too much and go to visit those poor women who are selling their bodies. So be sure to go outside, take this out of your mind, but when you're in a discussion with someone who thinks that all of this is based on some kind of well-researched foundation, you could bring up these details. Take care.